Good afternoon, friends and neighbors and friends. How's everybody feeling on the winter solstice? Well, if you're here in New York City and its suburbs, you're feeling pretty good because I swear it's 50 degrees here. Feels like March, feels like maybe October. I mean, it's like a gift compared to the deep freeze we've had, but for everybody else who's getting the more traditional fare, I, I don't mean to gloat. I'm just stating a fact. And lately, the hot topic of conversation all around the internet, the water cooler, and everywhere else is freedom of speech. Because we've seen two celebrities, Martin Bashir on MSNBC and Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty on A&E, suffer some consequences for saying a little bit too much or a little more that was needed. Now, people are throwing around the term First Amendment free speech. What exactly does that mean? Allow me to quote to you chapter and verse. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's what it said back in 1791 when the United States Constitution was amended for the first time to add not only that clause, but 9 other ones just to make it complete. Something we all learned in school called the Bill of Rights. Now, how's that apply here? Very simply. The clause states, as far as free speech is concerned, that the government of the United States cannot pass a law that deprives you of your freedom just because you want to say something that they may not like. That definition was expanded further in the decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court in the 20th century, because they found the 14th Amendment, which applies against the states, that is, no state shall ... incorporates the Bill of Rights to apply against the states the same way it has always applied against Congress. So it means neither the feds or the states or any political subdivisions can throw you in jail and deprive you of your freedom just because of something you said. You can say anything you want and be free from prosecution. That's it. People want to throw around First Amendment freedom of speech here, but constitutionally, that does not apply. What does apply is apparently the consequences of that speech. And unfortunately, the Founding Fathers did not phrase that First Amendment to indicate that nothing at all will ever happen to you. It doesn't say that the world can't respond to your freedom of speech. It can and it does. Okay? And what we've seen here by way of example, maybe some of you might have a job, which means you work for somebody else. Somebody else signs the paychecks that you use to pay for rent, food, and basic sustenance. Now, if you want to buy the freedom of speech argument, it means you can use social media and either make a video, go on Facebook, go on Twitter, go on some other network, and say whatever you think about the job, your boss, your coworkers, and nothing can happen to you. Well, you know what? Nobody's going to come to your house and arrest you for saying those things, but you know what? Your coworkers and your boss and a lot of other people who may be associated with the business you work for also have social media, and there's a good chance they can see and hear what you're saying. And just like you have the freedom to say whatever you want, they do too, and they also have the right to act on what they think and say. And there's a good chance that if you say something critical of your employer out here on social media, they may do an impersonation of Donald Trump and say, "You're fired." It's their business, and maybe they don't want somebody who works for that business to slander the business or the people who own it. They have the same right as you do. You can say it, they can respond. First Amendment does not apply to what a private employer can do in that situation. Now, with Martin Bashir and Phil Robertson, technically speaking, I think it's more of a contractual relationship than it is an employer-employee relationship. But nonetheless, these gentlemen represented two entities that were a little bit bigger than they were. So that's why what they said had some consequences. Now, Martin Bashir, he's entitled to think that way about Sarah Palin, but he is a journalist. That means when he presents the news, or even if it is his opinion, he must do it in a professional and respectful manner, because that's what he's there to do. That is how he gets the ratings, and that's how he represents MSNBC. Maybe he wanted to insult Sarah Palin some way. He could have used that intellect that we know he has from all those years at the BBC And he could have done like my father says, choose your words wisely. He could have come up with something much wittier, even funnier than that wouldn't have sounded so horrible and disgusting and derogatory and made it less of a body blow and more of a critique of what she thinks and how she performs, being who she is as a public figure. But instead, he took the low road, and he's going to have to be looking for somewhere else to provide his opinion and his journalistic skills, because his integrity went down and it took some of MSNBC's with him. That's why you can say freedom of speech, but you know what? If it hurts the network and it hurts the people who sign his checks, something's got to give. It's a little bit different with Phil Robertson, I'd like to think, that because you see, number one, he didn't make those comments on the show. He did it during a magazine interview. However, he already said stuff like that on the show, and he's been saying stuff like that for years and years. In fact, the reason he says stuff like that, and his sons do too, is the reason why he's got that show. A&E created this whole reality show around him and the Robertson family because they thought it'd be really neat, great for ratings, funny and entertaining to have these country boys act like they act and say what they say. He was basically being himself, and he's suffering some consequences. But because I say again, this is probably a contractual relationship and not employer-employee relationship, I think we all need to take a look at the contract he and his boys signed. Is there a non-disclosure agreement? Is there a morals clause? Is there something in there that said, don't say this stuff when the cameras aren't rolling? I mean, that's what contracts are. Those of us who are in the know understand that these are private agreements between parties. They're meant to avoid going to court because they provide their own self-executing remedies and penalties. And if that's said there in black and white, don't say this stuff unless we want you to say it, or you're out of a job, then too bad, so sad. He didn't read the fine print, but A&E hired him to be this guy, and he was being this guy. Where's the remedy here? Why does A&E have the right to do this other than what I just said? Well, you got to look a little bit deeper. This was not Martin Bashir, a dry British journalist. This is a guy from Louisiana who makes a living off selling these duck calls and has gotten the attention for being unafraid of being so conservative and saying what he says about certain people and their activities. Yes, I'm being more cautious than him, but that's my choice. The point, the crux of the matter here is that sometimes your responsibilities and common sense outweigh this issue of I can say whatever I feel like. The rest of the world can issue consequences and responses or just stop talking to you. They have that same right that you do. However, if you're saying something that does not affect your livelihood or where you live or who's in your social circle, and you feel like saying something, just come out and say it. Maybe some of your friends or other people might feel a little bruised, might feel a little offended, but if that's all that's happening, that really shouldn't be a reason to hold back. They don't pay you salary, and they don't make any rules that govern what you say and what you don't say, okay? This is where your freedom is unchecked. If they want to respond or possibly ignore you, that's their right. But if it's not going to be such a big cost, then there's no reason to hold back. Just like with anything else, you do a cost-benefit analysis. These guys, Martin Bashir, Phil Robertson, they should have done exactly that. They should have thought for a second, okay, either I'm saying this during my nightly newscast or I'm saying this because someone else is asking me my opinion. What's going to happen if I say this? I'm not saying you should be a scaredy cat. I'm not saying you should be a coward. Just saying you should be smart. Anticipate some consequences. What could or would happen if I say this? And what could or would happen if I don't? Nothing more than intelligence and assessing your responsibilities and possible consequences. Okay? So to put it short, the First Amendment does nothing but prevent you from being thrown in jail. It does not stop natural reactions to what you say. And I think I've taken enough time to really put all that down here. Chances are you may have already seen that posted elsewhere, but I guess I wanted to put my own little spin on it. So, whatever you're doing this afternoon, right now it's 3:45. It's getting towards the end of the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice. If you're not too busy, maybe it might be a nice idea to go outside and watch the sunset at like 4:15, because it's not going to be that early the rest of the year. I mean, it's not something that attracts people the same way that another sunset would, but hey, science is wonderful. It's okay to appreciate it once in a while. Good night, everybody!